Now, if the general public in UK were not aware, it was a weekend of major strife and upheaval with a national strike, which hit a number of cities. This was really incredible stuff, and major events happened in Plymouth. And Ben, you were there.
Indeed, I was, yes. Great to be here. So, police reported a tense, challenging and sensitive day over the weekend on Saturday as a wave of anti-government protests and counter-protests was staged in towns and cities around the UK. And I think staged is probably a good way to describe it. I went down to Plymouth to take a look for myself. Hello, it's Ben Rubin from UK Column in Plymouth. And a few days ago, Devon Live shared a story about an upcoming protest which is happening today, being organised by a national strike movement protesting against the Labour government. It's got a bunch of demands, it's got an agenda, a bit of a manifesto, and they're going to be out on the street protesting. Interestingly, there is a counter protest which just happens to have been organised for the exact same time, and the counter protest is coming out, one would have to guess, on the side of the government. And that one's been organised by a bunch of unions, including Unison, organisations like Stand Up to Racism, I've spoken about previously on the column, which is headed up by people like Diane Abbott, the long-time Labour MP. And I think there's something a little bit fishy going on here. Where have these protests come from? What are they actually for? Who's behind them? And what's going to happen on the ground today in Plymouth? Let's find out.
Interesting observations, Ben, and I think you're spot on. Something very strange. What did you discover?
Something very strange going on. A protest and a counter-protest, all conveniently organised at the same time. This Devon Live article that I mentioned in that little piece there is how I came across this, but it's been all across social media. Police prepare for national strike in Plymouth this Saturday. Concerns have been raised of a repeat of last summer's disorder. That's referring to some low-level violence and a few arrests that were made on August the 5th last year, which is in the immediate aftermath of the Southport killings. There were lots of protests all around the country, including the Walthamstow protest, which I reported on, which was actively if not arranged by, then certainly led by Stand Up to Racism, as I'm going to get into a little bit later on in the piece. But let's have a look here at back to the article. There's a bit of description about this national strike. A quote from the organisers: "The people of the UK are under attack from the very people elected to serve us." I have to say that I agree with that. They say, "Let our government, local councils and judiciary know that we are Great Britain." So this is a patriotic message. There is discussion of illegal immigration, demands to leave the European Court of Human Rights, the cancellation of net zero, the scrapping of inheritance tax, a demand for the government to release all documentation with regards to the Pakistani rape gang inquiry, calls for freedom of speech provisions for the UK to prevent beliefs and opinions being criminalised. I think a lot of this stuff is fairly reasonable, to be honest with you. It also says, by coincidence, these are consistently the talking points by MPs and councillors belonging to Reform and previously UKIP, as well as Conservative MPs. So this has very much been positioned on the right wing. This is the national strike anti-government protest.
Can I be a bit tougher, Ben, and say, to me, this is anybody who's actually challenging the government quite rightly in these areas is now going to be smeared with activities by this unknown group of people. That's my take.
That's certainly what it feels like. There's also some quite inflammatory language in there. So actually it talks about justice for an estimated 1 million plus little girls with the Pakistani rape gangs. I think that's probably overestimating it. I think it's certainly tens, maybe hundreds of thousands, and I'm not diminishing that at all, right? But actually they've over-engineered that statistic a little bit, I think. And also there's, again, just this focus on the Pakistani rape gang issue, which certainly is an issue, but actually this is a much broader problem. Right, so there's a lot of stuff in here that actually I think that I would agree with, but then actually it feels like they've overdone it in certain areas. And actually, I'm a little bit suspicious about why they might want to do that, to be honest with you. We'll come back to that as we go along. Who's behind this? So it's this organisation, the Great British National Strike, which is run by a former soldier called Richard Donaldson. And this just popped up in August last year. Right, so we got this relatively new, relatively unknown organisation, which has just somehow managed to organise a network of protests all around the UK. So there were 3 in Devon and Cornwall alone. I think we had Torquay, Exeter, Plymouth, and then these have been going all around the country: Lincoln, Norwich, Swansea, Manchester, Edinburgh. And actually, apparently, there's some stuff been going on internationally as well. So places like Amsterdam, I've heard talk that there was a similar thing happening on the same day, based around the same issues. Not saying that all the international stuff was necessarily organised by this organisation, but there does appear to be quite a lot of coordination happening here around these supposedly organic street protests. Anyway, let's head back to the article, because as I said, there is a counter-protest as well. Really importantly, the counter-protest, as I mentioned in the film, comes from Unison. So this is a union-backed thing, the National Education Union, the RMT, Plymouth Women's Network. So we're getting this kind of gender-based, intersectional perspective coming into this. And importantly, groups such as Stand Up to Racism, who we spoke about again last year, Diane Abbott was the president. This is very closely linked into the top levels of the Labour government, right up to cabinet, but also the kind of historical anti-fascist movement, Hope Not Hate, these kinds of organisations, right? And this sort of anti-fascist message was absolutely central. As you can see again here on the piece, no fascists in Plymouth. Join the counter demo. Far-right groups online have called for demonstrations in cities across the UK under the farcical banner of a national strike, even though they're not backed by a union, because apparently it's only unions you can strike. And apparently this strike is in favour of a tax on immigrants and Asian communities, tax exemptions for millionaire farmers, and climate change denying conspiracy theories.
So I got to say, Ben, this agenda to me is being wound up by Devon Live. I wonder whether this is a democracy reporter who's actually put this together. So we've got unknown people who establish a supposedly nationwide demonstration, then they're supported by bona fide organisations. How does that work? And then they get massive coverage in Devon Live. If this was just an event which had been created by some of the, let's say, reform, would it have the coverage in Devon Live that this event has got? And I would suggest no. No,
certainly not. And there was an ITV crew down there, and it's been on the BBC, and it's been pretty much blanket coverage, actually, right? So call me suspicious. But anyway, the counter-protest, interestingly, kicked off first. So I went down to the city centre, and I had a little look at what was going on. You can see quite a bit of police presence there. This is just after 11 o'clock in the morning on Saturday. Lots of people who are sort of not quite coppers, so the community people and private security. And you can see all the flags are there. So Unite's there, Unison, the Refugees Welcome, Stop the Far Right banners from Stand Up to Racism. And there's a lot of people, about 100 people, and this crowd grew to about 150, 200. A lot of people like this fella here with a mask on, really not wanting to have anyone see who he is, actually, right? There were quite a few people like that. And I spoke to someone in the crowd who said that they had spoken to some people who were masked up who'd come from out of town, right? So actually, I get the sense that quite a few of these people are not from Plymouth. Although they are, interestingly, given that this is a counter-protest to the anti-government protest, they are actually quite down on Keir Starmer. So there's a little sign you can see there which says Starmer has blood on his hands, which is absolutely correct. Might be a little bit small on the screen for some people, but down the bottom in the centre there, you can see that. And that's obviously to do with this. And these were the two largest flags flying on the day. So you've got the Palestinian flag on the left-hand side there. And then what I see is essentially the globalist flag, right? That's what that flag is to me, that transgender LGBTQ flag. That's about globalism, ultimately. And the key thing for me here is that you're not going to unite the British people under those two flags. Those aren't our flags, right? It's not to say that we don't care about Gaza, we don't care about Palestine, but if you're going to try to create a united national movement to fix the country, you've got to do it under your own flag, ultimately, right? Really importantly, and that's not what these people do. Who else was there? So this was the TUC, Plymouth Trades Union Council, who actually were established in 1897. I know I said a minute ago that I think quite a lot of these people were from out of town, or they're students, or that kind of thing. There were some roots here, right? So to give them their due, this is an organisation that's been in Plymouth, no doubt looking out for the welfare of working people for a long time, right? So it wasn't just the case, but there were also some of these kind of not quite paramilitary groups, but certainly activist, anti-fascist types, and the sorts of people that you get along with that, right? So there's a lot of young men in groups with masks, looking quite uncomfortable, to be honest with you, right? And then you got a real sense with this lot, and I'll get into it a bit more in a moment, that actually they're quite intimidated. They're quite, they're scared of this sort of far-right bogeyman, basically. And I think that's driving a lot of the behaviour. All the messaging was being driven by essentially a ringleader. So there's this guy here. I don't know who this is, but I'd certainly like to find out. And he was leading chants through the day. They were handing out these leaflets. You know, this is all very, very well organised. I'll pull a few of these out so we can have a look at them. The top one was repeated a lot, saying, "We are many, you are few, we are Plymouth, who are you?" And that was all being directed to the opposition side, right? And actually, I see that as a provocation because actually, as we'll come on to it a little bit later, the people on the other side of the square that were in the protest were Plymouthians. You go and talk to them and you can hear, right? Their accent was a local accent. They're local people. They're concerned about the future of the country. So I see this as a provocation, not just that chant, but really a lot of the behaviour on the ground as well. Health and housing degradation is not caused by immigration. BS, I won't say the word, but you know what I'm saying. Come off it. The enemy is profit. So there's a lot of this sort of, it's illogical, right? Health and housing degradation is not caused by immigration. Well, it might not be the only thing that causes it, but actually if you load in millions of additional people into the country, then the health system's going to suffer, housing's going to suffer, it's going to degrade. So you're chanting things which just aren't true. And then a really, really heavy anti-nationalist, globalist message: no borders, no nations. Yeah. Yeah, they want to destroy the nation state. Brick by brick, wall by wall, racist borders have to fall. Borders are racist. Yeah. This is the position that we're being presented with. That is a totally radical position. Yeah. There is nothing mainstream about that, really, when you get into it. Right. But we're being told that this is supposedly the voice of Plymouth, the voice of the people of the Southwest. And I'm not sure I buy it.
I think there's a good way of putting it, Ben. This demonstration orchestrated by unknown people is to tell us something. It's to tell us how we should think.
Yes.
So highly manipulative event, not only manipulating the people who attended, but also the people who receive the message via the wider mainstream press. There's something very devious going on.
Indeed, there is. Yeah. Now let's just have a little listen to the chants. We've got a quick video for you.
Degradation is not caused by immigration.
Bullshit! Come off it! The enemy is profit!
Health and housing degradation is not caused by immigration.
Bullshit! Come off it! The enemy is profit!
We are many, you are few.
We are Plymouth, who are you?
We are many, you are few.
We are Plymouth, who are you?
We are many, you are few.
We are Plymouth, who are you?
We are many, you are few.
So there you go. We are Plymouth. Who are you? You're the fascists. You're the Nazis. And who's he actually talking about? Well, you look on the other side of the square. When that was happening, you basically got about 20 older ladies, mothers, grandmothers, who are concerned about what's going on in the country, basically. They're talking about the boats. They're talking about two-tier justice. They're talking about the issue of net zero. Lucy Connolly was a name that came up a lot. And the left wing, the counter-protesters, are basically standing there screaming at these people from the other side of the square at 11 o'clock in the morning. You know, the tone of it was remarkable, as I go on to describe in this next little clip. So this is kind of mad, actually. It's basically what we've got is the anti-fascists over there, who are fairly numerous and very clearly quite well organised. Lots of banners, lots of leaflets, guy on a microphone who's leading this chant. And there's probably, I don't know, a couple of hundred people tops. And then on the other side of the fountain, you got the main protest, which hasn't started yet. So this slot started at 11, and the actual protest is starting at midday, supposedly. And over this side of the fountain, we've got, it's basically about 20 people. And they're sort of standing there, looking quite bemused by the whole thing, to be honest with you. And the guy leading the chanting over there, I don't know who that is. Basically, he's spent about 5 minutes explaining to all of the people in his crowd that they should be scared of the fascists and that they need to stay together so they don't get attacked, and then to follow him 30 feet over there so that they can basically stand there and shout at these other people. And that's what they've been doing for the past sort of 5 or 10 minutes. So the crowd did get significantly larger, actually, on the other side of the fountain, and a lot more men turned up. The ladies were there early, and but it was a really interesting mix of people. Right, it wasn't an organised group particularly. They'd heard about this on social media. They wanted to come out and basically, I would imagine, have a bit of a discussion and a debate about what's going on in the country. But they were being prevented from doing that by just this racket coming from the counter-protest on the other side of the square. And I had some great conversations. A couple of people who recognised me, a couple of UK column viewers came up to say hi. It was fantastic. One of the things that I was slightly concerned about, you can just see here, the lady policeman, is that what, can I say that? The police ladies just walking around, they're all wearing cameras, right? And so it was always in the back of my mind that actually a lot of this is a data gathering exercise, right? And I think that the people who've set this thing up essentially want to see who comes out, how they behave, and get a load of information about what's happening in the city ultimately. And this will be going on all around the UK. Now that was just 5 minutes into the start of the protest. They carried on going with their chanting for the next hour and a half, as I describe in this last little clip. So it's now 1:15, and the anti-fascists, Plymouth is anti-fascist, is it? They're still going. They've been chanting for about an hour and a half now, and you've got a bunch of people on the other side of the fountain there, a lot of whom are just normal people, you know, concerned about the direction of the country. Had some very interesting conversations. People basically saying we're being governed by an international crime syndicate, which I completely agree with, and we got a lot of concerns about what that international crime syndicate is doing in the country. And That all seems perfectly reasonable, but there's no actual discussion going on because the anti-fascists, with their stand up to racism banners, and their socialist worker banners and all the kind of usual suspects, are just shouting at people. Which actually seems to be the tone of national debate more broadly, doesn't it? People just shouting at each other, and in the volume, no appreciation for shared heritage, shared objectives, any of the things that would actually lead to, useful progress in the country. Now, obviously, this has been presented by Stand Up to Racism as some kind of great victory against the far right. We can see here from the website, the far right Great British Strike has been seen off by a determined anti-racist resistance who just happen to want to destroy the nation state. That is their literal stated position. That's what they're out there talking about. And what about the national strike movement? Well, UNN pulled this out from Twitter, which I think speaks volumes, actually. This is a bit of interaction here between an account called Neki, another one of these nationalist accounts that's popped up in the last year or two, saying, when do you think we will reach the stage of civil war in the UK? The Great British National Strike Group saying, I feel like it's imminent, right? So actually it strikes me that this is part of this narrative and this attempt to spark off civil conflict. And UNN, good on them, say these people are going to march the Tommy Tards to the top of the hill and then run off, just watch. And I think that that's probably fair to say. It screams of psychological operation being run by the establishment. And it's basically a direct attack on patriotic working class men and women. That's the way that I took it. And interestingly, as a final point, the Great British National Strike Twitter page has just been taken down, and we don't know what's going on there, but I'm sure we'll find out more as the week goes on.
Ben, thank you very much for that excellent summary of events in Plymouth. We've taken quite a long time to cover this because we think it's so important, because, of course, it wasn't just happening and hasn't just happened in Plymouth. It's happened in other cities as well. It's happened in Northern Ireland. And as many people are now beginning to think, is this type of event designed to not only demoralise people in the country, but to destabilise communities? And meanwhile, we get the globalist agenda pushed through, and if you dare challenge it, you're some sort of right-wing extremist.
Exactly.
So we regard this as a very, very dangerous precedence on the streets of UK, and we're certainly going to be digging into it more. If any of our viewers and listeners have information about who is behind these sorts of events, then please do let us know.